All right. My name is Chris Campbell. I'm a practicing CPA and I work with small to mid-sized businesses and individuals to help them pay the least amount of taxes possible while keeping them out of jail. So today's topic is it's more along the lines of personal finance. I know I do a lot of topics as far as like business and saving on taxes, but this has come across my plate recently and I figured it'd be good to share. And it has to deal with spouses and coupling their finances. And also, more importantly, when spouses separate. Now, whether that be by a legal separation, a divorce, and sometimes, unfortunately, death. I've dealt with a number of situations with clients where I see this time and time again. And unfortunately, it's with a lot of women and ladies, is you have a couple, they're together, and a lot of times the guy will have the role of handling the finances. And then there's either a separation or there's death. With that though, and when that happens, I've seen it plenty of times where the spouse, the wife, is not prepared. They're just really not prepared financially, or just even the knowledge base financially to know about their affairs. So when it's time to get the estate order or get their affairs in order, it just makes it that much harder to do so because you just weren't aware of your financial state, what was going on. So the point here is just being with women, or even if you're the spouse in a marriage, you may have one spouse that handles the finances. And I think that's okay. But I think the moral of the story here is that even if your spouse handles the finances, the idea is that you should be somewhat knowledgeable or aware, right? Because we all have our strengths that we bring to our respective marriages. But I think it's a matter of just being aware of what exactly is going on. So just a couple of examples. I was recently approached with a case where the couple separating and the spouse had no idea that they had not filed their taxes in about 8 years. And the spouse had no clue because that was something that the other spouse had done, right? So as far as they were concerned, the spouse was handling that, and now come the divorce, and now from the arrangements for the divorce, they've learned that it actually wasn't being handled at all. So that's one example there where if you're filing your taxes and that's something that one spouse was normally in charge of, make sure that you, at bare minimum, have a copy of the returns. If you are filing tax returns, you do have to sign a tax return. So if you're going to sign off on a tax return, make sure that you're at least getting a copy of it. If you do have a preparer that's doing those taxes, make sure that you're at least understanding what that preparer done, or if you just have questions with that preparer, it's okay to ask so that you have an idea of what's going on. You may not know 100%, but just so you have an idea, know that it exists so that these things come up, at least you're aware of your tax situation. Because again, going back to this client, they were caught completely off guard with a rather messy tax situation, and they just didn't know, no clue. So be prepared, at least be knowledgeable, have copies of all your returns, or at least know what the copies are so that you can access them, or have some sort of shared file or database where at least you can go and grab these tax returns, even if it's shared between you and the spouse. So definitely be prepared to do that. Another situation is any life insurance or retirement accounts. Make sure that each spouse is aware of existing policies, existing accounts. And if so, make sure that each spouse knows about them and they have access to those accounts so that they're aware that they exist. So example story there is had a relative that had passed away when I was very young. And my father always tells me the story that he had 2 insurance policies, but his wife only knew about one of them. So they cashed out one of the policies, but my father happened to know because this relative had discussed with him that he had a second policy. So he had actually told his spouse that there was a second policy and that she had to go and look for it, but she was unaware of it. And lo and behold, it took her a while, but she found it. And she was able to cash in on the proceeds of that policy. But again, had my father never told her, about it, she would have been none the wiser. And that's because as spouses, this wasn't communicated. I don't know if she forgot. He never told her. I don't really know what the circumstance was. I was very young at the time. But the point being is that she wasn't aware, and it almost cost her a lot of money for not knowing. So make sure you're aware and have access to retirement accounts and insurance policies. So that's one thing. And then the other is just make sure you have access to the accounts. I know, like for myself, with my businesses, my wife is a joint owner or signer on all of the accounts. So we actually went through a session and I went ahead and put her on all the accounts, even though she doesn't really do anything in the business accounts. She doesn't really do anything on the accounts, but she is on the account so that if something were to happen to, she would easily have access to that cash to do what she has to do until the insurance policies kick in. But that's just another example. The moral of the story here is just make sure that you're sharing your financial pictures with your spouses, just so that, again, if something were to happen to either one of you, the other one can pick up the ball and go. So I don't want to get too much into estate planning here. I'm not an estate planning attorney, but the whole moral story is, hey, look, make sure that your spouse is just aware of both financial situations, accounts, and that your spouse can access them. Because there's a lot of horror stories. They're not able to, or when it comes specific with taxes, just not really being aware of what's going on, what the other spouse is doing with the tax situation. And then you can wind up owing a lot of money and you have no idea about it. So just make sure you're staying on top of that thing. Hopefully you found it helpful. And if you have any more questions about this topic or any other tax or account related questions, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help. All right. That's all for now. And I'll talk to you next.